Hello everyone, it's Christina from Our Wood Home. I recently realized that I've never shared my simple technique for decluttering clothing. I've probably mentioned it in a previous video or maybe a blog post, but I've wanted to dedicate a whole video to it. When I declutter, I try to focus on practicality over sentimentality, which I realize might sound a little callous, but this is actually helpful for me because if I thought about it, I could come up with a happy memory for every single item of clothing I own, and that would make it harder to let go of. I created this flowchart to help myself figure out how to get rid of things that I no longer need or want. And this isn't probably a new concept. I'm sure somebody else has come up with a similar chart, and neither is this the perfect method for decluttering. This works for me. It might work for you as well, which I hope it does, but if it doesn't, that's okay. There's not one decluttering method that works for everybody. One isn't superior to another. There's lots of them out there, so if this doesn't work for you, I encourage you to just find one that does. Now let's get into this flowchart. I'll talk a little bit about each tier and explain things as we go along. First of all, top tier. Does it fit now? I'm sure most of us would say we are not at an ideal body right now, but this is something you need to think about realistically because you might not ever fit back into that old t-shirt from high school or your favorite clothes from a few years ago, and that's okay. Keeping those items might cause more stress and anxiety than giving them away. If you're actively losing weight right now, keeping your larger clothes might seem like a good idea in case you gain it back, but perhaps consider keeping only a couple pieces as motivation to continue working towards your goal. I've personally saved a lot of clothing from high school because it does have happy memories attached to it, but realistically, I will never fit into those clothes again, so it's okay to let go of them. Next, is it wearable? If something fits but it's so full of holes that it's indecent, it may be best to part with it. I'll talk about sentimental items later on though. Please don't donate unwearable clothes to the thrift store. Many of them have textile recycling programs, so you can contact your local stores about that. The landfill in my area also has a textile bin, so you can check with the landfill in your area about a similar program, and it's a free drop-off. Next, do I like the item? I'm personally guilty of keeping clothes that were perfectly fine, but not really my style. I didn't like wearing them, so I never tried to wear them, and they took up valuable closet space. It can be hard to let go of items like this because we may feel bad about wasting money, or if somebody gave it to us, we may feel bad about not wanting to keep it. If that's the case, consider donating these items to a women's shelter or ministry program so that they can be used by ladies who truly need them. Does it coordinate with my wardrobe? When I was actively trying to find my personal style several years ago, I bought some questionable items of clothing. One example was a bright yellow wool skirt with a geometric print. I thought it was nice, but I only had one white sweater to wear with it, so I wasn't wearing it very often. I could have bought more tops that would match, but it made more sense for me to simply donate the skirt instead of buying more. That brings us to our next tier on the chart. Am I willing to buy more? Using the yellow skirt as an example, it was not a piece I loved, so I wasn't willing to spend more money to make it fit into my wardrobe. There are some items I have that didn't really fit well with anything else, but I wanted to keep them, so I made a list of a couple extra items to buy that would allow me to make complete outfits with this piece. And finally, does this fit my current lifestyle? If you are only familiar with my YouTube channel and not my blog, you may not be aware that I used to have real jobs outside the home. Over the course of my married life, I have worked as an administrative assistant, as a jewelry store clerk, a temporary receptionist, a public librarian, a grocery store cashier, and much more. Most of my jobs required a business casual style of clothing, and once I left those jobs, I didn't really have reason to wear those clothes anymore. At some point, I had acquired some nice semi-formal clothing, but I never had occasion to wear them. I realized I was not likely to wear my business casual clothes nor my fancy clothes, so I donated them all. Now I make it a point to only keep clothing that I can wear for my lifestyle right now. For me, that means casual dresses that work for heavy gardening, grocery shopping, and visiting family. Generally, I can make the casual dresses a bit nicer by adding a cardigan. I'm sure that there are some people who would say maybe just make those fancier pieces work, find a reason to wear them or to go out somewhere to wear them. And that is a valid point. It's just not something that I was personally willing to do. When I go through this flow chart with an item and I decide I don't want to keep it, I have two options to consider: donate or trash. If possible, I will donate anything that is in wearable condition, but sometimes that may not work. For example, if the neckline is stretched out or if there's a stain. I will often cut up the fabric and use it for sewing projects or cleaning rags, but there are some garments that are not usable for that at all. As I mentioned earlier, many thrift stores have a textile recycling program for clothes that are not wearable. The landfill in my county has one too, which can be accessed free of charge. I would say this is a last resort for me, but it's better than throwing the clothing in the trash for it to be incorporated into the landfill. Let's talk about sentimental items for a bit. I recognize that there may be things we want to keep for whatever reason, whether it's something that we wore when we were a child, maybe a teenager, something that has a special memory associated with it. And I don't necessarily advocate getting rid of those items just for the sake of getting rid of things. What I like to do is dedicate one tote bin, a reasonable sized reusable tote bin, that I keep for sentimental clothes. I have some band t-shirts from when I was a teenager. I was very into the music scene. I would go to a lot of local concerts, and I amassed a fairly good collection of t-shirts. I also have a pair of shoes that I wore as a teenager, and I used to get bands to sign them. I know that's weird, but it was an important memory for me, so I wanted to keep those shoes. Also, over the years, I've been making a lot of my own clothing, and some of the pieces are no longer wearable because they were not very well made as I was just learning how to sew, but they're special to me for various reasons, and I wanted to keep them. So I filled a tote bin with these special garments, and I just keep it in my attic because I don't want to necessarily look at it every single day, but I also don't want to get rid of it, and it is nice to, at some point, pull those things out and reminisce about them. There is still some space in my tote bin if I decided to add some extra pieces, but for the most part, I'm sticking with just this one tote bin so that I can control the number of things that I'm actually saving and it doesn't become another mass of clutter in a different area. I should have added this at the beginning of the video, but I'll go through this flow chart, each step with one single item of clothing at a time. So I'll pick out a t-shirt from my closet and ask myself, does this fit me right now? If yes, then I move down to, is it in wearable condition? If yes, I move down to, do I like the item, and so on and so on. I should also stress that this is a method I do not recommend doing with somebody else's clothing unless you have their explicit permission. Of course, I can't speak to decluttering children's clothing because I don't have any children, so I'm not sure how that really goes, if there's much input from the child or if it's harder to let go of children's clothing for sentimental reasons. But I would never try this on my husband's clothing unless he gave me permission, so I do not suggest you do it for any other members of your household unless they give you permission to do so. I hope that you found this flowchart helpful in decluttering. You could, in theory, apply a similar method to decluttering other items in your house, and if that's something you would like some help figuring out, do let me know in the comments, and I'd be happy to make another video with another chart for other areas of the home. I should also add that this chart does not consider decluttering clothing that you no longer feel is modest if you are on a modesty journey. If that, again, is something that you're interested in seeing for decluttering immodest clothing, do let me know and I'd be happy to help with that however I can. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you consider subscribing and have a great rest of your day.